Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors on staff at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So as a piece of that, our goal each week is to bring you something that's hopeful and helpful. So subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge podcast. If you find today's episode hopeful and helpful, then please follow or subscribe, and then rate and review so that more people can find the conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a follow and turn on your notifications. Now today, I get to share with all of you a conversation that I had with Vilar, the Greenfield Ridge Kids director. In our conversation, we chat about the Ridge Kids experience and how to help kids navigate the transition to a new grade. This is my conversation with Victor. Hey, Victor. Thanks for coming on to the Ridge podcast.
Well, it's glad to always be a part of it. And it was good to actually see you in person last week. So now that you go away, you get to come back and see you on a screen again. So
yeah, it was fun to be three-dimensional. I was chatting with people in the lobby while I was in town, and they're like, "Oh, it's fun to not see you on a screen." I'm like, "Thank you." But yeah, it was fun to be seeing people and interacting with people. It was cool to kind of also revisit, and here's my nice little segue here, to kind of walk through some of the Ridge Kids spaces and things like that, and see all the cool stuff that's like happening in Ridge Kids. And a lot of, I think it was cool to see a lot of new faces just around the Ridge and new families. And so just experiencing, I think, a lot of, a lot of the Ridge for the first time. So,
yeah. It's been a really cool thing. I think over this past year, there has been an extremely huge amount of under 2-year-olds flooding the area again. And that's good. That keeps Ridge Kids in business is the youth of it. Families keep happening. And when families keep happening and they trust and feel comfortable to bring their kids in for the first time, that's a huge stepping stone that I think that is really exciting. So.
Yeah. So when a family comes in for the very first time, or maybe like you're chatting with them and you're like, hey, they're not exactly sure what Ridge Kids is all about. What do you have like a typical go-to, hey, in a nutshell, this is what Ridge Kids is, and this is what's happening in the rooms?
I think the first thing I think of, and I know it's such a generic word and it's used everywhere, is fun. It's fun. I think about when I do my team member orientations for a new team, we have 4 core values, and the last one I come to is fun, and it's because, hey, if a family's coming in for the first time and they're like, hey, music's pretty good, that pastor's all right on his message, but yet they go and they pick up their kids and their kids are like, that was so fun. A family is going to make any sacrifice if their kids are having a good time. If they think it's what's best for them to be able to build it up. Because I was going to say, even if it was the opposite thing and it's like, love the pastor, love the music, they're just going down the list, love the coffee, but they come and they pick up their kid and their kid's like, don't ever bring me back here again.
Yeah.
That's going to be hard for a parent. Even if they know it's going to be a good place for them, that puts them in a dilemma of thinking, oh, what do we do? They're going to keep searching for what's best for their kids. And that, I think, is really, I don't want to say the challenging point of working within Ridge Kids, but it's a thing that we have to keep thinking about is this has to be a fun environment. But the secondary thing that I would also just say, other than fun, is this is an opportunity for them to really learn the first stepping stones of their faith journey. It is, as what I call a swear word, it is not childcare. As in the children's world, we're like, this is not childcare. This is an educational setting to help them take those first steps in their faith journey. Other than the nursery. Nursery, we don't teach anything. We are like, hey, this is the ministry to help parents so that you can hand your child off for 1 hour and have a coffee and relax. And just that's what I tell our nursery team members is like, hey, you're doing the ministry for the parents here right now. Everything beyond that is we want to be able to help them take that step. Still a ministry of the parents so that they can have that hour. But now it's an educational setting to help them learn about their Lord and Savior. And I think that's just what's so awesome.
Yeah. How do you balance the I know the three competing things are always happening. It's like, hey, how do they learn something about faith and
Mm-hmm.
learn about how God views them and how God loves and values them, while making it fun, and then also throw in, I think that key, like, it's got to be safe, right?
That
And
is that's one of our other core values. It's got to be safe
yeah,
too. Yeah.
how do you balance all three of those things, and also knowing that in every room and every age group, all three of those things look a little bit differently.
Yeah. You are spot on. That's why when we bring in new team members, say, hey, we want you to shadow and we want you to explore multiple different rooms so you can be able to see what attaches to your heart slash what you connect with, because the difference in the 2-year-old room to the 3 to 4-year-old's room is very different and how they transition. What I can be able to let a family know too is consistency is the most important. When we see a 2-year-old come for the first time, they've never done daycare or childcare, and they're screaming and yelling right away, I have to be able to, like, this is going to take time. You have to be able to look at a kid and the team members and say, this is going to take time, but you got to keep coming back. And then usually a month later, you're looking at this kid and they're walking right in, or they'll cry for 5 minutes and then they're fine. And they're like, okay, I get it now. This is a part of the transition. But if they come once and they come a month later and then they come 3 months later, that kid's never getting that rhythm of what that looks like. It's hard for them to be able to, it's hard for a kid to feel like it's safe if it's only a once in a great while. But if it's a consistency and a faith component of like, hey, we're coming here and we're doing this, now they're going to start latching on, and they're going to, like, oh, even when they're crying and they're kind of quiet, they're kind of observing the video from afar and watching, oh, what is this? There's an owl on there. It's Ollie the owl. But yeah. Oh, what is he talking about? And so there's consistency, there's familiarity to it. And then if they're coming consistently, now they're connecting with certain team members. The parent is feeling safer, seeing the same face over and over again. So a lot of it is, it's not a one-time thing that everything just kind of comes and collides, but there's this component of like, hey, we're going to make a commitment to being a part of this. And that's hard. Sometimes that commitment is once a month for some families right now, because of that's just how their schedule lands and it goes. But we say, hey, the more you can be consistent, the more safe you're going to feel, your kid's going to feel, the more fun they're going to have, because they're going to just come right in. And then once that safety and that comfortability comes within a kid and a parent, now they let their guard down to be able to, like, be open to what is being taught and what's there, because otherwise they're not going to open themselves up to that.
So touching on that, like, what is a typical, I guess it's like, so it's an hour, right? What's a typical hour look like in Ridge Kids?
It depends upon which hour and which room too. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could just be mass chaos for 40 minutes and then controlled chaos. That's what I should say. We try to aim for controlled chaos. If you're looking at one of our preschool type rooms, it's going to be more of like kind of just letting them in. We've got about a half hour time frame to allow families to bring their kids in. So 15 minutes before the service starts to 15 minutes after this service starts. And then we actually close off the rooms. And that's so our team members can get started and there's not as many interruptions happening. Because if you had families still coming in a half hour later and just being able to drop off a kid here, drop off a kid there, then you have 2 and 3-year-olds that are getting all worried, thinking their parents are coming to get them. So so there's all these different things that kind of,
so it's really a safety thing, right?
Like, it's a safety thing too. And it allows our team members to actually use the skills that we've used them for too, of like, hey, we have some lessons for you to teach. Yeah. Now this gives you the opportunity to teach those lessons instead of like having to check in another kid or having to do another bathroom break and things like that. So right about that 10 to 15 minutes in the service is when we have lessons that we edit, that we have a curriculum called Orange Curriculum that we are using, and we edit it so that it's kind of curtailed to a 1 hour period. And so there's 4 or 5 activities that they can use in the preschool rooms. There is professional videos that are already done and made that take about 10 to 15 minutes. They use that somewhere within the confines of that hour. And then when everything's kind of done or they get through everything, they have about 5-10 minutes left, and now they allow them just to kind of free play again, just to be able to kind of do those things. Sometimes they're going all the way up until parents come to pick them up. And so that's preschool. And then in elementary, the one difference is we try to really start breaking them up into what we call small groups, or just groups where it's like 6 to 10 kids in that range, where they have a team member or even just a teenager, depending upon what level they're at, to be able to lead a small group of taking some of the materials, taking them off and dividing them up. If we have 20 kids in the room and we have 3 people that can do it, let's split them up into a group of 6 or 7 kids each and allow them to be able to have a voice. That's the really thing that I stress, is allowing the kids to have the voice, and not so much the teachers just talking at them the whole time or the leaders talking at them the whole time, but giving them a voice to ask a question and allowing 6 kids to have a voice. If you have a class of 20, if you have a room of 20 kids and you only just talk at them, or you ask a question to 20 kids, not every kid feels like they have the opportunity to have a voice. Does it always happen the way we want it to? No, it doesn't. But that's what we try to keep building towards, is be able to break them up into smaller groups so they have a voice. So they do small groups, and then there's a large group aspect of what they do too. And the large group for kindergarten through 3rd is they get, we have a little hosted game. So they do a little game real quick, about 5 minutes. Do a worship song about 5 minutes, and then they have a video as well. And then once a month, we have a live storyteller that actually comes in, so they can actually see what a 3D person does look like, to tell a story, and to be able to do that. So there are a couple different components there. I kind of explained, wrapped it up as much as I
that's great. I think that's a great, and I think you touched on so many different key, really cool points of what I just love about how Ridge Kids functions, right? Is it does have that opportunity to build that relationship with a team member, like you mentioned previously, and how that's even important in transition. And we can come back to transition in a second, but and how that built that relationship, and then you give them a voice to be able to speak into those specific things. So it's not like, hey, we just shared a bunch of information. Now 8-year-old, go do those things in your like everyday life. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's going to work great. But instead it's that, hey, that's that relationship, and allowing them to have voice about, hey, what does that specifically look like? And letting them talk about, well, yeah, maybe for you, your first steps in learning how to pray, and I'm sure this happens a lot, is praying for your pet, is praying for your dog and your cat and your goldfish, and being like, hey, my dog's sick. I know those prayers come all the time. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. And those prayers, and a lot of heavier prayers as well too, but it's amazing how they come up. But one of the beautiful things is working towards those small groups is I've seen kindergarten, 1st graders sitting in a circle, sharing prayer requests with each other and actually praying for those things, like at kindergarten, 1st grade level, like they get it at that level. And we have adults that are afraid to say an out loud prayer with anybody around. And it's a very interesting thing, because I think kids are such a beautiful reminder of how God can truly work through us. And I think that's really cool.
That's awesome. Okay. So speaking to the transitions, you kind of touched on it briefly.
Yep.
Ridge Kids does make a pretty big deal about how you transition when you move up to the next grade, right? I know we do move up weekend. Why, before we get into the mechanics of it, why do you think it's important to like make that transition very clear and very strategic in how it's done?
Yeah. And this has been an experiment. We have went from transitioning grades at Labor Day weekend to doing it at the beginning of summer to now the last 2 years we've done it the first week in August. So there's been a different couple transitions, but on doing that with experiment. But the thing is, we like consistency and we like comfort. And the thing is, our world is always changing and our world is always transitioning. Mm-hmm. So how can we help best set our kids up for transitions? And I think a part of it for us is they are getting older. So they're always getting older. And so instead of keeping, a kid in the 3 to 4 year old's room all the way up until through 5th grade, that doesn't, it doesn't do much. So like to transition to the rooms, it's showing that they are growing, that they are becoming older, that they do think differently now. And they're able to do different things. and talk
Yeah.
about different things. And so that brings a couple different components to the forefront.
Yeah.
And so that's what's in front of us. Now, because there's transitions bring about anxiety. They bring about nothing for other people. They're like, okay, I'm on to the next grade, but they bring excitement. They bring, on the parent side, because I think there's always, when it comes to kids, well, obviously students too, there's always a parent component of what we have to think about and the kid component.
Yeah.
Uh, and there are parents that are hesitant to move their kids up. And then there are other parents that they won't even talk to you and they'll move their kid up automatically to the next level too. They're like, oh, they're ready. They're ready to be able to do that. And so that is one thing. And then there's kids on the opposite end too that are ready to move up or not ready to move up. So
Is there things that you've noticed about how you can transition them to make it more smooth?
Yeah. And I think a part of what's helped with that is doing it how we did it this year is in August. How we've been able to do it is do it before the other transitions come. Because what we noticed in September, when we get to September, all the transitions happen at once. It's one just big wham. Everything's transitioning, everything's got to change, and it's kind of just mass chaos. So I said, what if we take a step back and do it a little bit earlier so that the kids can get ready and used to one's transition in their life, so they don't have to worry about all of them happening at once. There's still going to be a lot of them happening in 1 or 2 weeks here. Some schools are even starting next week, but in the next 2 weeks, there's going to be a lot of newness. And said, so what if we try to do that a little bit early to work with them, to be able to allow parents to say, hey, move them up when they're ready. They're a 4-year-old and they've been in the 3 to 4-year-olds room for 1 full year. And now we move them to another room. And that was a little bit scary. Well, it's like, hey, you have the whole month of August to help them transition. And so we ended up doing a lot of that. This last week, they did the 3 to 4s room the last week or two, but now we're like, hey, try out the 4K room again, try out the 4K room. And they did, and they were able to do it. And it was a little rough for some of them, but it gave that parent that time frame to be able to help work with their kid, to be able to introduce them to new team members. Even some 3 to 4-year-olds going to that room, giving their 3 to 4-year-old leader a hug one more time before, and then saying, hey, I'm moving up, I'm transitioning, I'm getting bigger. Those are the cool things that you notice that certain relationships have built. Like kids don't want to leave certain rooms, but know that that's a part of life. You get a teacher for 1 year. And so does that help answer that question?
Yeah. So when there's a kid that's having a hard time transitioning, and I think, you could broaden this into school as well. 'Cause I think there's probably some mutual lessons to be learned there. But when there's a kid that's having maybe a little bit more of a challenging transition, are there things that you notice that maybe either parents have done in a really effective way, or team members have been really helpful in doing, or it could be even as you're a parent yourself, you've tried to success?
Yeah. One thing that I think has really always been great is if they're having hard time transitioning, keep them where they feel safe first. But then after the room, or even or after the hour is done, to check them out and take them over to the room where they should be going to, and let them meet the leader. Let them just walk around the room, where it's like, hey, the whole on safety part of like, oh, we're trying to check you in and then move out so we can go to service, is like, hey, take the time, take 5 minutes to go check the room that they can be a part of, and help them feel safe in doing that. That's one thing that I've noticed. And then also too is sometimes just being able to, gosh, I've lost my thought on that one.
No, I think that getting somebody safe with a place, I think, is a really impactful thing, to where they can explore, and they can see, and they can ask questions about it, and they can kind of test out the waters, so to speak, to where they're like experiencing a little portion of this transition ahead of time, and having those things ahead of time, so it's not all at once kind of thrown into the deep end, so to speak. I think that's a cool depiction of, hey, how do you help somebody transition, and you help them build their confidence in the new space, in the new environment, in the new grade,
And that's where that was the other point I was going to make, was just sometimes we have families that have multiple kids, And a part of the safety component is being with that sibling to help them feel safe. So they're two different age groups. We allow that to happen. We don't try to make that happen for a long-term thing. But again, it's like, okay, let the older kid go in with the younger kid. So if you have a third grade brother with a 4K sister, the third grade brother can go in and be in the 4K room, because now he can almost be kind of a helper. Hopefully that's as opposed to distraction, but it's going to bode a lot better than a 4K going into the second and third grade room and being there and trying to be able to be like, now they're out of place in a different way. So look, working on those transitions, I really think we have mainly like, this is how we want to run things, but we'll take it on a case to case basis based on the parents and how comfortable they feel and what makes them feel safe, but also what's going to work out best for their kids, whether it's just a regular, hey, I don't feel comfortable here, this is my first time, to, hey, there's a kid with special needs and they need some extra special attention in this area. What's going to be a better situation for them? And then we'll take that on a case-to-case basis.
You mentioned that there are schools starting up, maybe even as soon as next week. I know every district sometimes even every school is a little bit different in terms of when they start. But would you have any advice or thoughts for parents who they're transitioning their kid to the next grade? Is there any helpful things that maybe you've experienced, you've seen parents experience that can help ease that transition and set their kids up for success?
Yeah, we actually got to work with this last year with my son moving into middle school. So he went from grade school to middle school. And by the way, I think he loved it. I think it was a great transition. But a part of that, I think most of the time, and that it's harder for the parents than it is for the kids, because they're watching their kid move to another level that maybe mentally they're not quite ready to be able to hand them off to yet. Because I think a part of being a parent is holding on to the memories and them needing you. And every transition means it's another step closer to you allowing them to be more independent. I mean, think about that first big transition is handing them off to kindergarten, or even just schooling in general, is they're around you 24/7 to all of a sudden now 8 hours in the day, they're not around you anymore. Like 1/3 of the day, they're not influenced by you. But the other 2/3 of the day, well, at least 1/3 of the day, there should be sleeping the other third, but the other third of the day is you still have that time. You still have that time to invest in them and pour in them. And so I think that can be harder on the parents. A part of what
so right there with the parents, and maybe we can come back to the kids in a second, but with the parents, how do you it's hard. How do you make that transition as a parent? Is that like having conversations with other parents? Is that doing some own personal reflection on why that's challenging? Because I imagine you don't want to, display this anxiety that almost creates an anxiety in your kid because you're processing through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This comes back to I just did a child dedication yesterday. They've come back to the child dedication aspect of how many weeks you get with your kids while you have the biggest influence with them. Is you get 936 weeks approximately from when they are born to when they graduate. And right now you're at this stage. You're at, hey, we are now at 450. We got about half of them left of the weekends we have to lead and influence our kids. And that can be really scary for some because they feel like it's slipping away as a parent. And then it can be an advantage if you're like, this is a new opportunity. And this is where I really hang on to is like, this is a new opportunity. All right, they're going into 6th grade. They're going into 9th grade. They're going into kindergarten. This is a new opportunity for me to be able to step and lean in. So maybe if that causes anxiety as a parent, that's when you need to be able to call on your village, and say, I'm really struggling with this. And this is where it's great to know a couple or a couple of families that are a couple steps ahead of you. Just whether, so if you're ready to transition that kid into kindergarten, even if it's for the 3rd time, because that you have to remember, even if you've done it before, each kid is different. Even when they come from the same genetics, each kid's different and it's their first time. So don't gloss over their transition and how important it could be for them. Just because you've done it 2 or 3 times as a parent, it's their first time going through this. And I think it's easy to just, oh, we've done this process before. Oh, we've registered them. We've done it. We did this. Make sure you celebrate it just the same way that you celebrate it for your first child. I think that's really important as a parent to know that like each transition is going to be different for each kid, and to really focus on that and look at it, but then also connect with parents that are a few stages ahead of you so that you can just be like, hey, my kid's really struggling with this, or I'm really struggling with this transition right now.
Yeah.
Hey, can you speak into how you were able to do it? Because I think each situation, I could give multiple examples here, but you don't know me. You're going to lean in a little bit more on someone you know and trust that's going to be able to maybe give a different perspective.
Yeah. That's really good. You know, it's interesting. Just even hearing you talk on this and throughout the whole conversation, I'm just struck by how different every situation can be. You know, every kid's different, every parent's different, how you respond with your kid, you know, like it's all like so situational and challenging in its own unique ways. Or maybe for some it's, you know, it's less challenging, but I think I think there is an element of like realizing that it's okay to have a hard time. And it's okay to ask for help. I think those are two great pieces you just illustrated. I'm curious, do you feel like there's any like themes? Because like even in the different situations, it seems like there's like, okay, what like theme can somebody grab onto? Was there a core like piece of advice that you were told as a parent with transitions that it would be helpful to share? Because I imagine, you know, there are probably people feeling like, oh, my situation is the only one. And I'm sure you're not, though it's really easy to feel alone in those times. But yeah. Does that question make sense?
Yes. And I think I'm touched on this, but I don't know, is you as the parent are still the most influential person in your child's life, no matter what stage they're at. And I think that's the most important thing to learn, because I think parents believe they are starting to lose a little bit more of their child as they transition to a new thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And, you know, like when they go to 6th grade, when they go to 9th grade, when they graduate from high school, the relationship changes at each stage. And that's scary. That's scary because we lose more time. We lose in a little bit more time. We lose a little bit more of the dependency that child once had. And I think sometimes parents want to hang on to a little bit of that dependency selfishly. I'm not saying that sometimes we do. And then there's some parents that are like, go be independent, just start doing your thing.
Yeah.
But again, it's the difference in parenting styles. And I think it's even different between the different parents in the house too. Like one will want to hang on to that a little bit more, while one will like be a little bit more comfortable to help push them out there a little bit more. And so each transition will happen a little bit differently too. Cause I think about my 7th grade son, and I believe a lot more of his transitions will come more this year. Like, I feel like I look at him now and I'm like, I feel like he's more ready to be a middle schooler this year than he was last year. I think last year it was still all learning transition new, but I'm like, oh, there's going to be so much more different changes. Even though he's used to middle school and knows what it's about and what it's going to offer, there's going to be some different challenges for him this year. And that's what I need to be praying about and ready for as well. But I would say you're still the most influential person in your child's life, and lean into those transitions and those changes that you are starting to see, and pray about those things, because they're not going to always want to talk about them. But again, keep those other families close and the transitions that they went through and already seen a couple steps ahead of you.
That's really good. And hopefully that's an encouragement to those that feel as though they are losing influence. It's like,
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can wrap up on this, but I'm curious, week before, maybe it's 2 weeks before school starts, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's even the first week of school, right? But are there any types of specific conversations that you think are super helpful to have with your kids during that time to help them get ready?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the more effective things that we've done, we haven't done this every year, is to sit down and talk about the upcoming school year as a family during a family meeting, or whatever. I one time had our kids write what goals they wanted to accomplish for the year. Like, even if they were just very minuscule type things, like, hey, you're heading into 5th grade. What are your goals this year? Like, what are you excited about? And then we write those down so that we have, it's almost like a little bit of a family plan for the year. And instead of like the mom or dad saying, hey, this is what this is going to be, this is what this is going to be, sit back and ask your kid and listen and like see what they want to have to say. Like, and don't rest at, oh, I don't know. Like, no, we need something like because I don't know will come by the time it's a certain age. I don't know what age that will be, but get their feedback on what they're expecting and what their hopes are for this season, because that will help put more things in perspective of what you can be keeping an eye on and what you can be praying about. Pray for your kids, pray with your kids. Those are the things that are going to be, because there's going to be something that even on you plan for, or what you see, or whatever happened in your grade year of that it's going to be different for them. It's not going to always be the same. A lot of times parents, I'm guilty as well too, we kind of have hopes and dreams of things that we missed out on that didn't happen in our childhood that we hope to have happen for our children, and allow their whatever's scripted out for them, or the choices that they're going to make, allow those things to be able to happen and be able to kind of like be free and open of listening and hearing what they're experiencing, because it's not going to be the same exact experience you had. And we can't force that to happen. And so we need to be able to be open and listening to them and pray with them. One thing we just did this last week is we scripted out 7 days of the week. And we said, we're going to pray, instead of just talking about what we're thankful every day of the week when we pray at night or when we pray at dinner, we're going to pray like, and we had them come up with a list. What are 7 different things we can pray out for each week? So one was our church family. We can pray for people in our church family. One was just things happening in the world. What can we pray about that are happening in this world? Another one was our teachers and our classmates. So things like that now every Wednesday, we're going to be praying about this. Every Thursday, we're going to pray about this. And it just keeps our perspective on what's happening around and how God's interacting and coming around with us. Knowing that something will happen that you don't expect this year. And how are we going to be ready for that? Because another transition that you weren't expecting will happen.
Yeah.
Sorry to leave that on a cliffhanger. That's not really an answer, but it's more of a cliffhanger.
No. Well, no, what I'm hearing from you is that there's like one, like having the conversations about like getting them to like anticipate and think about what's going on this year and how can you be a part of that, and if they have a hope in a certain area, like, or an expectation in a certain area, how can you speak into that in all sorts of different ways, or maybe there's a expectation that there's an anxiety piece of that for them, or all different sorts of things. And then 2, how do you help them create these habits, because they're not going to naturally create the habits, but how do you build those into a routine that kind of sets them up for success, and almost this little mini opportunities to process through prayer. I think is a really cool way of doing that. So, Victor, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for your little insight into the Ridge Kids world, and also just into the exciting but difficult season of transitions.
No, always a pleasure. And if there's any parents that are listening to this that have kids in Ridge Kids, please come up and chat with me. I would love to. One of my big things that I'm really trying to pursue and do this year is just being able to like connect with the families a little bit more. But also, if there's an opportunity that you want to just get a coffee, that I would love to just be able to go and just listen to what's going on, so that we can know more of how we can be able to just help the needs or the steps forward for your kids.
I love that. Thanks, Victor.
All right. Take care.
Well, that was my conversation with Victor, and I think my big takeaway for navigating transition really is to help remove as much fear of the unknown as possible. Learn what that experience is like, share that with your kids, help them experience it in doses, and be alongside them for the journey. If you'd like some more resources for this topic, check out the podcast episode with Tyler Volkers where he discusses starting the new school year strong. You can find a link to that episode in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast, and make sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.